There's a number floating around right now, $500,000 for a house. Not in Manhattan, not overlooking the Pacific. We're talking about a 3-bedroom, suburban home with a 2-car garage and a backyard that needs mowing. The kind of place your parents bought for $180,000 in 1998. And here's the thing, nobody wants to say out loud. If you're watching this video, you probably can't afford it. Not because you're bad with money, not because you didn't work hard enough, but because the math behind home ownership in 2026 has become so brutally unforgiving that even people making what used to be considered excellent money are getting priced out of the most average homes in America. So let's do something most people avoid. Let's run the actual numbers, the real income you need, the hidden costs nobody mentions, and the quiet financial violence happening to an entire generation of would-be homeowners. Because when you see it all laid out, you realize this isn't just about housing anymore. First, the setup. $500,000 for a home is not an outlier. It's not a coastal anomaly. According to the National Association of Realtors, the median home price in the United States hit $420,000 in late 2025 in desirable suburban markets. In cities with actual job opportunities, $500,000 is the starting point, not the exception. Phoenix, Arizona, $510,000 for median single family. Austin, Texas, $560,000. Denver, pushing $600,000. These aren't tech hubs where everyone works at Google. These are cities where teachers and nurses and accountants are supposed to live. And yet, the standard advice has always been simple. Don't spend more than 30% of your gross income on housing. It's a rule that's been repeated so many times. It sounds like gravity, like it's just how the world works. But let's test it. If you're buying a $500,000 house, you need a down payment. The traditional advice says 20% to avoid private mortgage insurance. That's $100,000 cash saved after taxes. Already we have a problem. The median household income in the United States is around $80,000. If you're saving 10% of your gross income, which is aggressive for most people, you're putting away $8,000 a year. It would take you 12.5 years to save that down payment. And that's assuming home prices don't rise during those 12 years, which they will. But let's say you get lucky. Family help, a windfall, a decade of ruthless saving. You've got your $100,000. You're putting down 20%. You're borrowing $400,000. Now comes the mortgage. Interest rates in early 2026 are hovering around 6.5% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. They've come down from the 7% spike of 2023, but they're nowhere near the 3% dream of 2021. At 6.5%, your monthly principal and interest payment on $400,000 is $2,528. But that's not your real payment. You also have property taxes. Let's say you're in a state with a 1.2% effective rate, which is close to the national average. On a $500,000 home, that's $6,000 a year, $500 a month. Then homeowners insurance, depending on where you live and whether your state has been hit by wildfires or hurricanes or the general chaos of climate instability. You're paying anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a year. Let's split the difference and call it $2,000. That's another $167 a month. And if you're in a suburban development or a managed community, there's often an HOA fee. Could be $50, could be $300. Let's say $150. Add it up. Principal and interest, property taxes, insurance, HOA. Your real monthly payment is $3,345. Now apply the 30% rule backward. If your housing payment is $3,345, and that's 30% of your gross monthly income, you need to be making $11,150 a month. Gross. That's $133,800 a year. For a $500,000 house, let's pause here, because that number probably feels wrong. $134,000 a year sounds high, but not impossible. There are people making that, couples making that combined. But let's remember what we're talking about. The median household income in America is $80,000. We're talking about needing 67% 30% more than the median household just to responsibly afford the median-priced home in a mid-tier market. And it gets worse when you zoom in, because that $134,000 assumes you have no other debt, no car payment, no student loans, no credit card balances you're carrying. The moment you add a $400 car payment and a $300 student loan payment, your debt-to-income ratio starts creeping up. Lenders get nervous above 43%. You start getting denied. So the real number, the number that gets you approved without sweating, is higher, probably closer to $150,000 for a house that used to cost a third of that. But even if you hit that income, even if you're a dual-income household pulling in $75,000 each, you're not safe, because you still need to save that down payment while renting, and rents have been climbing in lockstep with home prices. The average rent for a two-bedroom apartment in the United States is around $2,000. If you're making $150,000 combined, your take-home after federal and state taxes, after health insurance and retirement contributions, is maybe $9,000 a month. You're paying $2,000 in rent. That leaves $7,000. Utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, phone, internet, the subscription services you've forgotten you're paying for. Let's say $3,000 a month for living expenses if you're careful. You're down to $4,000. Now try to save $100,000. At $4,000 a month, fully dedicated to saving, that's 25 months. Just over 2 years. And that's assuming zero emergencies, no medical bills, no car repairs, no wedding expenses or family obligations or any of the psychological wear of living like a monk, while everyone around you is taking vacations and going to restaurants. Most people can't do it, and the ones who can are postponing everything else: kids, marriage, career risks, the stuff that used to define your 20s and 30s. Here's where it gets darker, because the 30% rule, the one we've been using this whole time, is already a compromise. It used to be 25%. In the 1970s, financial advisors recommended spending no more than a quarter of your income on housing. The shift to 30% happened quietly, gradually, as home prices rose faster than incomes and lenders needed to keep the market moving. But even 30% is becoming fiction. Data from 2024 shows that the average American homebuyer is now spending 37% of their gross income on their mortgage. In expensive markets, it's over 40%. People are breaking the rule because they have no choice. They're choosing between financial prudence and having a place to raise their family. And lenders are letting them because the system needs them to. Here's the secret nobody talks about. The housing market doesn't function unless people stretch. If everyone followed the old rules, if everyone waited until they could comfortably afford a home, demand would crater, prices would drop, and the entire apparatus built on rising home values, from mortgage-backed securities to municipal budgets funded by property taxes, would start to fracture. So the game continues. Lenders approve people at higher debt ratios. Buyers convince themselves they'll get a raise next year. Real estate agents say, if you don't buy now, you'll be priced out forever. And technically they're right, because home prices in aggregate have only gone one direction for 50 years. But what happens when affordability becomes so broken that even stretching doesn't work? Let's talk about what that $134,000 salary actually looks like in 2026. You need to be in the top 25% of earners in the United States. You need to out-earn 3/4 of the country just to afford a median home in a mid-tier market. What jobs get you there? If you're single, you need to be a senior software engineer, a physician's assistant, a mid-level corporate manager, a successful sales rep hitting quota every quarter. These aren't entry-level positions. These are careers that take a decade to build. If you're a couple, you need 2 solid incomes. 2 teachers won't cut it. The average teacher salary in the US is around $60,000. Combined, that's $120,000. You're $10,000 short. And that's before we account for student loans, which most teachers have. 2 nurses might make it. Registered nurses average around $80,000 in many states. Combined, you're at $160,000. You're in the range. But again, this assumes no debt, no kids yet, and the ability to save a 6-figure down payment while renting. See the trap? The jobs that used to anchor the middle class, The jobs that built the suburbs in the first place no longer pay enough to buy into them. Teaching, nursing, skilled trades, civil service. These are the professions we claim to value. The ones we clapped for during the pandemic. And they've been priced out of home ownership in the markets where they work. Meanwhile, the people who can afford homes are increasingly clustered in a narrow band of high-earning professions: tech, finance, medicine, law, consulting. The same fields that were already concentrating wealth. This isn't a housing market anymore. It's a sorting mechanism. Now let's add the variables nobody mentions in the TikTok real estate videos. Maintenance. Homes are expensive to own, not just to buy. The rule of thumb is 1% of the home's value per year. On a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 annually. New roof, HVAC replacement, plumbing disasters, foundation cracks. It all comes. Utilities. Heating and cooling a full house costs more than a one-bedroom apartment. Depending on your climate and the age of the home, you could be paying $300 a month in the summer and $400 in the winter. Furniture. You bought a house. Now you need to fill it. That empty dining room isn't going to furnish itself. People underestimate this. They drop $500,000 on a house and then realize they need another $20,000 just to make it livable. Opportunity cost. This is the big one. That $100,000 you put down isn't just gone. It's locked in your house. If you had invested it in an index fund averaging 8% annual returns, that $100,000 would be worth $215,000 in 10 years. Instead, it's sitting in your foundation. Now, yes, your home is also appreciating. Historically, real estate appreciates around 3 to 4% annually. But that's less than the stock market. And you can't access it without selling or taking out a loan against it. The pitch has always been that homeownership builds wealth. And it does. But it builds it slowly. And only if you stay in the home long enough to overcome the transaction costs of buying and selling. If you move within 5 years, you probably lose money. Here's the psychological trap. The one that makes this all so insidious. Homeownership in America isn't just a financial transaction. It's a cultural rite of passage. It's how you signal stability, how you prove you've made it. It's the thing your parents did, and their parents before them. And opting out feels like admitting defeat. So people stretch. They take the $7,500 mortgage on a $100,000 salary because they've been told that if they don't buy now, they never will. They convince themselves they'll be fine. They'll cut back on other things. They'll get that promotion. The house will appreciate and make it all worth it. And for some it works out. They get the raise. The market keeps rising. They refinance when rates drop. They sell in 10 years and make $200,000. But for others it doesn't. They get laid off. The furnace dies the same month the transmission fails. They have a kid and realize daycare costs $1,800 a month, and now they're underwater. They become house poor, trapped in an asset they can't afford to keep and can't afford to sell. And the brutal irony is that the people most likely to stretch, the ones most desperate to buy, are often the least equipped to handle the financial shocks that come with ownership. Let's zoom out, because this isn't just about individual decisions. This is structural. Why does a $500,000 house require a $134,000 income in 2026 when a $150,000 house required a $40,000 income in 1995? Home prices have grown 3 times faster than wages over the last 30 years. Not because homes got better, not because the land became more valuable, but because housing became financialized. After the 2008 crash, institutional investors started buying single-family homes at scale. Companies like Blackstone and Invitation. Homes now own hundreds of thousands of properties. They're not buying to live in them. They're buying to rent them out and securitize the rental income. Meanwhile, local zoning laws in most American cities make it illegal to build anything other than single-family homes in residential areas. No duplexes, no townhomes, no missing middle housing. This keeps supply constrained and prices high, which benefits existing homeowners who vote in local elections and oppose any development that might lower their property values. Add in historically low interest rates from 2008 to 2021, which made borrowing cheap and pushed prices up. Add in remote work, which let high earners in expensive cities move to cheaper ones, bringing their big city salaries and pricing out locals. Add in a construction industry that's been building too few homes for 15 years. You get a market where prices have detached from incomes, where the math doesn't math, where people are told to just work harder and save more when the real problem is that the system is rigged against them. And here's the part that should make you angry. The people benefiting from this aren't the ones struggling to buy. They're the ones who already own. Every time home prices rise, existing homeowners get richer on paper. They didn't do anything. They didn't improve the property. The market just moved, and their net worth went up. Meanwhile, renters fall further behind. Because as home prices rise, rents rise. Landlords can charge more because tenants have nowhere else to go. And every month you spend paying rent is another month. You're not saving for a down payment that's getting more expensive. It's a wealth transfer. From young to old, from renters to owners, from workers to asset holders. And it's accelerating. So what do? Some people say move, find a cheaper market, buy in the Midwest or the South, where 500,000 still gets you something nice. But that only works if your job moves with you, and if you're willing to leave your family, your community, your support network. Some people say wait, rent forever, invest the difference. And mathematically, in expensive markets, this can work. If you rent for $2,000 and invest $3,000 a month instead of buying, you might end up wealthier in 30 years than the homeowner who's been paying a mortgage. But that requires discipline, and it requires accepting that you'll never have the stability, the control, the sense of permanence that comes with ownership. Some people say policy will fix it. Build more housing, tax vacant properties, ban corporate ownership of single-family homes, increase wages, all of which might help. But policy moves slowly, and the people who benefit from high home prices have more political power than the people getting priced out. So in the meantime, millions of people are making impossible choices. Here's what nobody tells you. The American dream of home ownership was never a law of nature. It was a policy choice. After World War II, the government made it easy to buy a home. The GI Bill, federally backed mortgages, suburban development subsidized by highway spending. It was deliberate. And now, through a combination of financialization, speculation, and regulatory capture, we've made it hard again. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or hardworking enough to afford a $500,000 house. The question is whether we've built a system where only the top quarter of earners can access what used to be a middle-class norm. And if that's the case, what does middle class even mean anymore? Because here's the thing they don't say in the real estate seminars or the personal finance podcasts. Home ownership was never just about building wealth. It was about stability. It was about having a place that couldn't be taken away as long as you paid the mortgage. It was about having skin in the game, a reason to care about your neighborhood, your schools, your community. When home ownership becomes unattainable for teachers and nurses and tradespeople, when entire professions are locked out, you don't just lose wealth distribution, you lose social cohesion. You create a renter class that's increasingly transient, disconnected, and financially precarious. And you create an owner class that's older, wealthier, and more invested in keeping things exactly as they are. That's not a housing market. That's a class system. So let's come back to the number. $134,000 a year to responsibly afford a $500,000 house. It's not impossible. People do it every day. But it requires either being in the top income bracket or making financial sacrifices that previous generations never had to consider. Smaller wedding, delayed kids, no emergency fund, less retirement savings, decades of financial stress. And the cruel joke is that after all that, after the scrimping and the stretching and the fear, you get a house. Not wealth, not freedom, just a place to live that you're now tied to for 30 years. Maybe it appreciates. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're one broken water heater away from maxing out a credit card. Maybe you're fine. But the system shouldn't require this much luck. The brutal truth is that buying a $500,000 house in 2026 isn't a financial decision. It's a gamble. You're betting that your income stays stable, that the market keeps rising, that nothing catastrophic happens, that the math that barely works today will somehow work better tomorrow. And millions of people are taking that bet because the alternative, watching prices rise while you wait for conditions to improve, feels worse. So they stretch, they sign, they move in, and the machine keeps running. The question you should be asking isn't whether you can afford it, it's whether you should have to.